Tips with Toni. Tips with Toni. All about nutrition from your favorite dietitian. Everything you need to digest in your mind. Tips with Toni. Tips with Toni. Making you healthier one bite at a time. With Toni. Woo.
Hello, and welcome to the Tips with Toni podcast. I'm Toni Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time. This next guest is going to talk all about the ketogenic diet, and I'm so excited to have her because I get so many questions about keto, and luckily I don't have to answer them because she's going to answer them for you. So before you go and decide to try keto, you're going to want to listen to this episode because Katelynn goes over 7 things and a little bit more about things you should consider before going keto. Katelynn is a nutrition coach. She's in the middle of getting her master's in nutrition and a good friend of mine. So please, if you like this episode, do not forget to screenshot it, share it on your story, and let us know that you enjoyed it. Without further ado, here's the episode with Katelynn Duncan. Hi, Katelynn. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Excited to have you here. So, Katelynn, I'm going to introduce. I always introduce you like before we even start recording. I always say who you are and all that. So, but I want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself to my listeners. So, go for it.
Well, hi everyone. Like she said, my name is Katelynn Duncan. I am currently a virtual online nutrition coach. I specialize in macro coaching and flexible dieting right now, but I also have an immense background in the ketogenic diet in the clinical setting.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to talk about a big chunk of the episode is going to be about keto because I definitely wanted to have somebody on here with personal experience and clinical experience in keto because of the fact that that's where it originated, and most people don't always know that, although I preach it and talk about it all the time. Sometimes people aren't always listening when I talk. So, yes. So the ketogenic diet, can you please explain to people where the ketogenic diet originated from and why it is a diet, why it's even a diet out there?
So the ketogenic diet was it came about in the clinical setting. In the 1920s, the diet came about in the Mayo Clinic, and it was made to be a medical nutritional therapy for epileptic patients. Now, with that being said, the cause of that was a lot of people were getting into the clinical setting, their kids were having seizures, and they were being put on drugs. And if that drug didn't work, they were being put on another drug. What happens is a lot of those drugs have side effects. So their children were experiencing these side effects, and they were being put on another drug. And another drug, and another drug. And these parents were getting so frustrated because their child's quality of life was very minimal. It was very hard for them. They were having up to 30 plus seizures a day. And nobody could figure out how to treat this without putting more and more drugs on them. So Johns Hopkins actually was the first hospital to start looking into the medical nutritional therapy side of things and implementing the ketogenic diet for these patients. They started to see more and more and more success. And one story in particular that I would recommend anybody to look into is the Charlie Abraham story. The movie First Do No Harm. That movie expresses so much what these parents go through, so much what these patients go through, and expresses how one man and one family fully believe in this diet to the point where now it's being used as a practice full on in the clinical setting. We currently have less than 100 ketogenic specialist registered dietitians in the United States. So it's a growing need in hospitals. Creating our own programs, getting more doctors on board to realize that this is a practice that works. And there's continued studies out there that are showing patients improving their quality of life. And I think for me, that was where I found the most passion with it, was seeing the quality of life in these patients, seeing it change. So a little background with me, I actually worked in a children's hospital It was called the Children's Hospital of the King's Daughters. I was an infant formula tech at the time. I wanted to immerse myself in the environment while I was in school. And I actually shadowed a ketogenic dietitian. She specialized in it. And I used to follow her, and I used to nitpick her brain all the time. I was so curious. I was like, why does this diet work? And I knew bits and pieces. And so as I went through my degree, that's kind of where the expertise comes into play. We tend to push away the diet very quickly and judge it really quickly. But I was so into the clinical side of things and why it was working, why it was a good thing. And so I shadowed her, and there was one patient in particular that I shadowed, and he literally went from 30 seizures a day down to none through this diet, through her implementation. And it inspired me that diet really makes a difference in conditions that we have, and it can make a difference. And there's so many more studies out there about cancer and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's that we've looked into to continue to look into the ketogenic diet as a medical nutritional therapy that can be used over drugs. But this one particular patient, his father actually, and I'm going to get emotional here because the patient's name was TC, and we'll call it short. But the quality of life changed so much, and his father looked at me and he goes, "We need more of you out there. We need more of you researching this diet because it does work." And I fully believe it because I've seen that change in my son. And that I literally I ended up getting a picture with him, and I took that picture with me and, had it with me throughout my studies. And I was like, I want to help make a difference. I want to show that this isn't just a fad diet. It was made and created for a reason.
Yeah. And
I think, you and I as nutrition coaches, we battle this all the time. We battle this. The ketogenic diet has become such a fad. It's become a quick weight loss tool. And people have forgotten what it was initially made for.
That's so powerful. And what comes to mind too is with gluten-free diets and celiac disease. And I actually just had Alicia Brown on the podcast, and we talked about this. And so often people will take diets that were made to treat disease states that affect the entire family and affect that person's quality of life and are not pleasant. And now they're taken and not even used appropriately and just, used as now this happy thing. But honestly, it's happy when the person sees results and they feel better. But let's talk about how difficult the keto diet actually is and how it works in a clinical setting because of all the control factors that are there. So I guess to kind of backtrack a bit, what would be defined as a ketogenic diet, and how is that utilized in the clinical setting? And then we'll kind of talk about how that would translate into real world application.
So the ketogenic diet is a high-fat, moderate protein, and low-carb diet. And when you're in the clinical setting, there's actually quite a few different types of the ketogenic diet that are implemented and used, and it's very dependent upon the patient. It's dependent upon what is going to be right for their lifestyle, what's going to work best for the parents, obviously, because they're the ones that are initiating this diet 99% of the time. They get educated in the hospital. They get put on it in the hospital, and then the dietitians obviously do a lot of education and coaching to the parents and to the doctors included. As registered dietitians in clinical study, we know that we are an interdisciplinary study. We are an interdisciplinary part of the team. And so our recommendations, especially on keto, are very, very particular and very precise, and everybody on the team needs to be on board, or this person can get kicked out of ketosis. And that's where we have issues of the diet not working, quote unquote, because it was never fully implemented. So the ketogenic diet, the classic ketogenic diet will be the one that you will see most in clinical settings. That's where the diet is 90% fat. So when you go down the line of the different types of ketogenic diets, modified keto, modified Atkins, MCT oil, those are just different alternatives to the classic keto going full 90% fat. If you say the MCT oil diet, that's one where 60% of that 90 is coming from MCT oil itself. Now, MCT oil is used because it goes straight to liver and breaks down the ketones a lot faster. But so to kind of explain exactly what the ketogenic diet does is it's a metabolic state. you put this patient in a metabolic state of something called ketosis, which is where the body becomes fat adapted. So instead of our body utilizing glucose for energy, which we get from carbohydrate sources that we eat, we also get it from, we start to store it. We store 24 hours worth of glycogen in our bodies. We start to utilize fat. Now we can either eat the fat or we can get the fat from our bodies. The only way to get the fat from our bodies is if we limit carbohydrate intake so low that we stop utilizing the glycogen, we stop utilizing the glucose as energy. We have to tap into the other energy source. Now, for food, all food breaks down into 3 macronutrients: protein, carbs, and fat. I like to say that our 2 main energy sources are glucose and fat. So if we take out the glucose, we take out the carbs, we're left with fat to use as energy. We can use protein, but we really don't like to. It's not our ideal thing to use for energy. But our body likes to utilize glucose first. So if we don't feed it with an extensive amount of carbohydrates and we're not constantly breaking down carbs for glucose for energy, and we have to tap into our glycogen and then we deplete that glycogen, then we're starting to utilize the fat on our bodies, or we utilize it by what we eat. And eating more of a higher fat diet is a way of doing this, because your body needs energy in order to function. But that fat gets broken down into what we call ketones, hence the name ketogenic diet or keto. So those ketones are now, quote unquote, the glucose that your body was utilizing. So ketones are to fat what glucose is to carbohydrates. To put that in short.
Yeah, no, definitely. That was very helpful. Thank you for that. And so I guess to summarize, if to go back to the reason why is like when someone with epilepsy, it's a disorder with the brain. And so when someone has carbohydrates, it will trigger that response. And so you want to remove that trigger, but you also want to make sure that this person has energy to get through their day. So It's kind of like using, it's the reason behind it is because we want to treat the epilepsy, but we also need to make sure that this patient or person has another form of energy. So I think that's like the easiest way to break it down to the listeners. And you did a really good job doing that. I guess you haven't
quite figured out the mechanism that controls that. And I think that's where we're struggling in research right now, is that we know it works based off the studies, but we don't know exactly what mechanism as to why it's working. We know it has something to do with the transports in our brain instead of the neurons.
Totally. So, okay. So that sounds lovely, right? Like if you put that on paper, like that's why it's so popular, right? Because it sounds amazing. It's like, oh, if I have my body will start using its own fat if I basically starve it, but not really starve it. Like it sounds ideal. So now let's talk about how that would look like in an everyday setting. Like to only eat, if 90% of your calories are coming from fat, you would have to limit carbohydrates. So like, what would that look like in a person's daily diet?
Well, I mean, again, it's going to depend on the patient, but I think overall, people forget that it is 90% fat. And I kind of came up with like 5 common errors I see people
let's do that.
Do when they try the ketogenic diet themselves. So first, we'll talk about, like you said, like what an overall day would look like for somebody. And with 90% fat, you're going to be adding fat to every single meal that you have, if not even having a shot of a tablespoon of coconut oil or MCT oil or olive oil. And sometimes when you say that to people, they're like, what? I have to do what? And they forget that you're 90%. It is not 50. It's not 20. It is 90% of your diet is fat. So you are going to have to get a lot of fat into your diet. So the way I would recommend all of this is to always add a fat source to every meal that you have. So for example, breakfast. All right, I'm going to have eggs, whole eggs, not just egg whites, but whole eggs, bacon, and you're going to add fat. So you can add cheese, you can add a tablespoon of butter, you can add coconut oil. And then for lunch, I like to recommend a voluminous salad because you're getting a lot of macronutrients involved in there. Always add protein, and then again, add fat. A key tip with that would be focus on your dressing, like focus on the dressing, but always add fat to that dressing. I would always recommend even adding another tablespoon of olive oil to whatever dressing that fits. And then dinner, a lot of people would go for a protein source, a vegetable, and then again, adding fat. If you're going to have steak and broccoli, add butter, add olive oil to that steak. Same thing with your broccoli. And that's going to help you increase your fat intake. Now, I think one of the biggest complications that people have is they're not adding the fat to their diet, and they're going towards ketone supplements. They're going away from whole foods. They're going towards processed keto products. They're creating keto baked goods. And while all those are great, we're getting away from the whole foods. The entire point of the diet was to kind of go back to eating whole foods, and then again, supplying yourself with an energy source that's natural, quote unquote, fat. Olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, removing the trans fats from processed foods and things like that. But sticking to a whole food diet, I think, is something that no matter whether you're keto or not, everyone could agree upon. But I would almost say there's 7 actually common errors that I have found that people try keto. And I'm going to list them out first, and then we can probably dive into them further.
Yeah.
But one is they're not ready to make this a lifestyle. It is very much a lifestyle. Ideally, when you're doing the diet, though, the 90% is clinical. I want to make that clear. The 90% is clinical, but if you are going towards this lifestyle, you can go anywhere from 70 to 90% of your diet being fat and still reach that state of ketosis. But they're not ready to make that lifestyle. They get to a point where they feel deprived. They feel like it's too much fat for me to add. And they begin to crave or binge on foods that they normally would eat or that they love. And that's sad for me. That's so sad for me that we get to this point where we're going on a diet and we're saying, well, I can't have the pancakes. I can't have the donut. I can't have this. I can't have that. I can't go to that social event because I don't know what choices to make. And it's not that there's not a way that you can turn this into your lifestyle and you can make certain adjustments on all those things. And as a ketogenic coach, like, that's a big thing that you need to do, is be able to coach your clients on how to incorporate this into your lifestyle so you don't feel deprived or you don't feel the need for those cravings. But if you're not ready for that, you're going to keep yo-yoing. You're going to go, I did the diet really well for like 3 or 4 days. I fasted. I didn't have a single carbohydrate. And then over the weekend we had a cookout and I ended up having the bun or something like that on the hamburger. And they feel so down about it. And they feel so deprived and they feel defeated. And then they go right back to it. So that's this yo-yo. The state of ketosis, in order to really reap the benefits, you have to be on it long term. 2 or 3 weeks max just to even get into the state of ketosis. And then it's a month-to-month thing of like continuously being on this diet. And if you don't stick with it, you're going to kick yourself out of ketosis and you're not fully keto. So that would be common error number 1. It's just not being ready to make this a lifestyle choice. Number 2, being in fear of carbs. I think people aren't fully educated on what macronutrients are when they jump on a diet or a 30-day challenge or a quick fix. And they start to fear carbs, and carbs are in our vegetables. Vegetables aren't bad for us. And even when they decide to get off the diet, that's a whole other topic of learning how to get on the diet and off the diet and doing it correctly so you don't gain weight back. Number 3 would be they eat very low calories. They get very fearful of calories, and they forget that fat is 9 calories per gram, right? And we have carbs and protein at 4 calories per gram. So yes, you're eating more calories when you eat more fat. So you do have to pay attention to your caloric intake. It's very easy for people to go over, but it's also very easy for people to go under. And they believe that they have to be in a fasting state all the time, that they have to eat very low calorie. And I see it time and time again of, okay, well, I'm at 800 calories today. That's okay. And then tomorrow I'm at 500. And they also start to they lose their appetite. They tend to feel super full all the time. And they have no food appeals to them. Nothing really tastes good anymore. So they start to eat very low calorie, and our bodies need calories. Yet again, like, our bodies all have a BMR. They all have a certain amount of calories that they need to function day in and day out. And yes, you're tapping into your fat stores and that's going to provide you energy, but you still need to eat things too. You still need to have energy throughout your day. So eating very low calorie too much, too often, being in a constant deficit, chronic deficit for too long. Number 4 would be they do not get enough protein. You'll hear time and time again people talk about hair loss and not feeling satisfied. And the 2 things I always look at for them is, did you add enough fat in your diet for the day? And did you add enough protein? Protein is so important for our bodies to build and repair. Obviously, eating too much of it on a ketogenic diet could also turn into it breaking down to glucose as well. But a lot of times that doesn't happen. it's so common for people not to get their protein needs. The fifth one would be they don't add enough healthy fats to their diet. They simply are not adding enough. And we kind of talked about that earlier, as far as like typical meals for day in and day out. You'll ask them what they had, and they'll say they had the broccoli and the steak, and they had the salad, and they had the eggs and the bacon, but they didn't add any fat anywhere. So then they really didn't hit that 70 to 90%. So then they still feel depleted. They still feel deprived. So they have to learn that they have to add fat. Number 6 would be becoming dependent on ketone supplements. So we know that our bodies are going to create ketones for energy. If we are drinking them, odds are whatever we don't use, we're going to pee out. It's just a common fact. It's the same thing with water-soluble vitamins. Whatever we don't use, we pee out. So although you may think that you're boosting your ketones, and it does help, it's not your body fully producing those ketones, and that's where you see the best results. Is when your body is creating ketones, not that you're drinking them. And they also can suppress your appetite. A lot of clients I saw, they would use those as like in between to kind of keep their ketones up throughout the day, keep their energy up, but their appetite was suppressed. They weren't really hungry for dinner when they got home because they had that ketone supplement midday in the afternoon, right before dinner. So people become dependent on that. And then the last one was like they didn't stay hydrated enough. And because when you get into a ketosis state, a lot of people lose weight very fast on keto, at least the first week. And the reason that being is because you're not holding on to glycogen, so you're not retaining water, and you lose all that. So that weight that you think that you lost, that you think is fat loss, is not fat loss. It's just water. Yes.
I tell people that all the time.
And so then they don't stay hydrated enough because your body's going to keep doing that. You're going to filter very, very quickly. And so you have to stay hydrated. You have to have an electrolyte supplementation. If you don't, you're going to feel, quote unquote, the keto flu, have headaches, feel lethargic, not have the energy that you want. So those are actually the 7 things that I've noticed most on coaching people on the ketogenic diet. And I think that's why if you are going to try the ketogenic diet, really look into getting with somebody that knows it inside and out, that can guide you through those things and keep you from making those mistakes.
Yeah, those are very helpful. Thank you. And I honestly think a lot of the things that you said is something to consider doing any diet, right? Is this going to be something you can commit to long term? Is it going to be adequate in all of the macronutrients, carbohydrate, protein, and fat? Obviously, with this one, we know it's not going to be adequate in carbohydrate. But I guess to kind of go off that, it's what are the consequences of not being adequate or not, or what can I do to make sure that I'm still reaching my needs? Because, for example, carbohydrates, like you said, we mentioned, they tend to be a good source of water. You tend to be dehydrated. You can become dehydrated. But also, carbohydrates are the only thing that carry some sort of fiber if you're choosing the right sources. So a lot of people on a keto diet, from my personal experience working with coaching clients, and then also just from what I've heard and what I've read, is if most of your fuel source is coming from animal protein or fats that don't carry fiber because they're processed, because if it was things like nuts or avocado, right? Those do have carbohydrate. And if you're limited by your carbohydrate, then you're limited with things that can carry fiber. So what are the consequences for someone if they don't have enough fiber in the diet, and what can they do?
So if you don't have enough fiber, obviously it affects motility. We don't digest fiber. It goes straight through us, but it does help our microbiome and our gut health. Mm-hmm. There are supplements and there are foods out there that have put fiber in there and made them higher fiber. Things like the Quest bar. There's a lot of like different mixes and things out there. The ketone supplements and things, that's for ketones. But what's it called? Benefiber, we actually use that quite a bit in the formula, infant formulas and stuff. So you'll see more and more keto products, quote unquote, that have fiber added to them. Most of it you're going to get from your vegetables, and you got to stop fearing the carbohydrates on that end. And fiber is very, very important. And again, hydration is key. So if you're losing all that water, you've got to keep drinking. Yeah,
totally. Yeah. So, okay. So these were very helpful. And I think the last thing that you said was extra important is working with somebody one-on-one. Like at every point in your nutrition journey, at one point or another, you're going to need guidance. And so I believe that I know we were talking before we even started recording, like, not everyone's going to be ready or have the mindset or understanding about the value of working with a nutrition coach one-on-one. So they're going to probably try to do these things on their own. And although it might teach them something and they're going to learn something from it, they will save so much time, energy, money, and frustration if they just hire a coach who specializes in the area in which they want to learn and works with them one-on-one. It's like any nutrition program you do, any diet you try or anything, if you think of it as temporary, it's not going to be effective. So anything that you do, when you work with a coach one-on-one, they're going to teach you how to find the things that fit best for you in your lifestyle. And so although you might work with a keto coach, which is I think a good transition to what you do now, you have experience in helping people with keto. And through your own personal experience, you realize, like, although it's amazing in a clinical setting, and although it might work for some people in like for real world application, I know that what you do now is more macro-based coaching, which is a lot more flexible. And you realize like that's really what you need. And so you can help people in both areas, and you can help them figure out what's the best fit for them long term. So I guess if you kind of just like talk a little bit about what you do now and why you kind of transitioned to being more of like a keto coach to now doing more like macro-based coaching.
So in the very beginning, before I actually got into my studies, I did do a form of macro coaching, and I loved it. And I think it's all about your lifestyle. I really, really believe that. I really believe it's like what you're able to maintain and will be sustainable long term. And I think that's where my mentality shifted a little bit was, yes, I believe in the ketogenic diet. Like you said, I believe it for the clinical setting, but I also believe that there's a time and place to utilize this and not to utilize this. A lot of the clients that wanted to do the ketogenic diet that came to me for it, they couldn't stick to it for the exact reasons that I listed.
Exactly.
And so as much as I would love to, and I will coach someone on keto, it's up to them. At the end of the day, it is very, very much up to them. And so I felt like macros, you don't feel deprived. It reminds you of what foods are made of. It doesn't make you feel like you're restricted in any way, shape, or form. You're learning what works well for your body. Some people, they do run better off of fat, or their lifestyle, like they tend to eat a higher fat diet. And so we adjust the macros accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's a good point. I'm going to put a pen in that. I want to make a comment on that. Go ahead. Sorry.
And so that's what's so versatile about macros. And that's what I love about, just teaching like the broad aspect of things of flexible dieting, because I want you to be able to enjoy food. I don't want you to ever feel restricted. And if you are gung-ho about keto, you believe in, the fact that back in the caveman days, this is how we ate and we fasted and we hunted for our food and we ate very little carbohydrates, and you love that and you love the longevity aspect of things and you're full on researching that, then yes, I will coach you on the ketogenic diet. And if you want that to be your long-term thing. Also, but and you can try it too, but I still believe that if you have a coach, there's someone that can guide you into ketosis, keep you on it for as long as you're willing to, but then also teach you how to get off of it. Because that is such a big struggle for people nowadays, is that they don't know how to get off the ketogenic diet once they've started. And then again, they fear things. And so if you have a coach that can help you wean yourself back to a normal lifestyle, then you gave keto a shot, great. If it helped you with that immediate weight loss that you truly, truly were looking for, or you absolutely needed for medical purposes or conditions, then absolutely. Totally. But at that point, you're going to want to go back to that normal lifestyle, that normal, I shouldn't say normal, but balanced way of eating.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's very individualized to the person. If they're super dedicated to learning it, it's an option. Mm-hmm. But I think at the end of the day, we can all agree that whole foods are the best way to go for anybody. And it's just a matter of what you're willing to do and what's going to fit for you.
Totally. Yeah. Okay. I wanted to make a comment, but I almost feel like that was such a great ending. Like, I'll just say really quick, I don't want to ruin that. It was like a good ending. Really quickly, I will say, you mentioned like some people do better on high fat. I believe that we're in the very beginning stages of science and research, and we're going to be able to see who, like, I like real world application, and I think it's easy for us to help our clients figure that out. But I've been feeling pretty soon we're going to be able to get tested for that. I know people think they can. The blood tests don't work. Don't fall for them. They don't work. But I do believe that we'll be able to, I think it's coming down the line where we'll be able to see like, okay, you would be better on a higher protein diet and a lower fat diet, where you would be better on high fat and someone else would do better on carbs. And I think everyone's, I really do believe that's coming down the line. But yeah.
Change everything when they finally get to that point.
Yeah, because then it'll take out a lot of the guesswork, and then we just have to help people apply. Because we all know just because you know better doesn't mean you do better. So we'll still always have a job. We'll help them apply it, but at least we won't have to like take out the guesswork for a lot of the beginning portion of our programming of trying to like put the puzzle pieces together. We could have like a good like, starting point.
Yeah, and it's so much trial and error on everybody. I don't think as nutrition coaches, like we learn that nothing is cookie cutter, nothing is simple, and it really is dependent on that particular person, that particular client.
Yeah, totally. I mean, their work schedule, their social life, if who they're cooking for, like, God, we didn't even talk about like things to consider. It's like, okay, you're doing keto. What about your family? Like, like that's one thing that kind of going back, and it all comes full circle. With the ketogenic diet, when a child has epilepsy, the whole family really has to, the whole family dynamic is different. And sometimes you might find that now the family is eating very low carb as a result because they're feeding their child that, very similar to people with celiac disease. Sometimes the whole family goes gluten-free just because it's easier, but that doesn't make it easy. It just helps a little bit. But like, I think people need to really realize like people's lives are being shifted, and like anything, whether you're trying to do this short term or long term, you really need to be mindful of like where you're getting your research from, where is this coming from? And just because the science is one thing doesn't mean it's going to work for me in my life. And it's going to probably affect other people in my life as well. So I should take that into consideration. We should just add that to the list of things to consider.
When it comes to keto, I'd say probably like my favorite resource for anything on the ketogenic diet, and especially clinical, would be the Charlie Foundation. They have created their website, and there's a lot of great resources out there. It is from, exactly like you said, professionals that know what they're doing, that have implemented the diet. So that's where I would recommend getting a lot of your... Repeat
that one more time because I want to write it down.
The Charlie Foundation?
The Charlie Foundation, yeah. And then you mentioned a movie.
First Do No Harm.
First Do No Harm.
Meryl Streep in it. It's a very, very good movie. It brings a lot of background into basically what Charlie went through and what his parents went through in order to find a cure for him and going through John Hopkins.
I love that. And so where can people find you? What if they have questions for you?
They can find me on Instagram at Kateylnn Duncan, KATELYNN DUNCAN _. Or you can find me on Facebook as Kateylnn Duncan.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much, Kateylnn. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
No, I greatly appreciate getting to come on here and kind of just preach a little bit about what the ketogenic diet really is, and come on here and not really be a diehard, you have to do keto or you have to do balanced macronutrients, but really being able to just be a voice to that keto has its time and its place.
Totally. Love that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that interview. If you're not subscribed to the Tips with Toni podcast, please subscribe so you can be notified when a new episode goes out every Monday and every Wednesday. If you're interested in trying the ketogenic diet, please don't do it on your own. As a matter of fact, please don't try any diet on your own. I promise you will have greater success when you work with a nutrition coach one-on-one. If you have further questions, send me an email, tipswithtoni@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.